Hello, and welcome to Level Up Stronger. The world is continuously changing at a very rapid pace. How can we all gain the competitive edge in our industries and thrive in them? What if you knew without the shadow of a doubt that self-education and access to forward-thinking experts in your field could catapult you towards success faster than ever before? The spaces we inhabit can inspire us, protect us, define us, and connect us, so we all play a valuable role in shaping their future. We plan to take a deep dive into various industries and careers. What are the future of the industries? What are the barriers to entry? And learn from the very people who thrive in them. We will take you behind the scenes to the people, products, and processes that keep industries thriving. In this podcast, we look forward to inspire and empower everyone to take thoughtful, educated risks and apply what we've learned in our lives so we can all level up stronger. Welcome to episode 3. In today's episode, we're going to be talking to Julie Kramer, co-host of Level Up Stronger and owner of A2M, bringing over 25 years experience in environmental remediation, historic preservation, and operation resource optimization. With a passion for maintaining and preserving history, Julie is working to ensure that buildings and facilities our predecessors created are preserved for generations to come, while working to integrate the new technologies that help make them more sustainable. And all of this while building a career. Julie is raising 2 amazing children as a single parent. We look forward to hearing Julie's journey to level up stronger. Welcome to being a co-host of the show, Julie.
Thank you so much. I am so excited to get this started off and to join you and further our discussions as we go on this journey.
Well, as we get started, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about who you are and what you've been doing for the last 25 years?
Sounds great. Well, to start this off, I would like to mention that I was a very quiet, shy little girl growing up in a small town, which many people don't believe today, and have since moved on to live on multiple continents and speak several languages. So there's so many possibilities in this world wherever you live and whoever you are, you never know where that journey takes you. I was always kind of striving to know more about what the rest of the world was like. And I went on to do an undergraduate in environmental science and in German. And I mention that because it kind of set the tone for the rest of my life, and that I've always had this intersection of kind of technology and science and humanities at the same time. I just loved both of those areas. And that led me to my first job at a research institute in the environmental remediation field, which interestingly enough, I landed that job because I spoke German and they had a project in Germany. So whatever those diverse experiences or talents that you have, you never know what opportunities those are going to bring to you. That also allowed me experience doing field work and getting out doing hands-on work. So although we were looking at innovative technologies, we had a small, a small crew that did a lot of traveling and allowed me experience on projects and plumbing. And I was fortunate to work with a great group of people that really, and a great company that started off my career. That said, I always had this interest in international development. It led me to do a master's degree later in international development, and had a period where I was living and working in Germany. I spent 10 years in Latin America, and some time in Southeast Asia and in Africa as well. That said, through my career path, I've had management positions, but I've also had interesting opportunities bringing in those fields of humanities, teaching, translation, employee relations, which gave me a really well-rounded experience of lots of different aspects of management and the trades. I continued that through my career as being a project manager, but also being involved in human resources, education, translation, and that I was fortunate enough that allowed me kind of a wide variety of experiences that I bring to my current profession every day.
Well, that's a really exciting. And I think that I'd really like to know more about some of the international things that you did. But what made you decide recently to start a business? So you just recently started a business, correct?
Yes, I
What
did.
does the business do, and what made you want to strike out on your own and start a company?
So I started my business after working with various small companies, helping them optimize their processes. And I had the experience of seeing small companies, some which grew at exponential rates and grew so fast that they weren't expecting what was coming. And I was interested in these processes, and I felt like I had, because you've heard about my diverse experience, my experience doesn't necessarily fit a nice tidy job description. And I felt like I had a lot to offer various companies going through different stages of growth, especially in a post pandemic world where a lot of businesses were disrupted and have unique needs that they may not necessarily hire a person to fulfill that role, but can use that resources on a short-term basis. That said, also we see a lot of growth in the workforce of different needs, people communicating with their Spanish-speaking employees, or those employee relations that a small company just is not going to have the resources on their own to do. And that's been a passion of mine in many different positions that I've held. And then also on a personal level, having children and needing some flexibility in the changes that we've been experiencing lately, I wanted to be there for my family and have a little more control over my schedule. So it's a variety of reasons that led me to that point.
So entering in and providing, it sounds like multiple roles in a consulting aspect. What have you seen in the different workforces and companies that you've worked in the last 25 years? And how has it affected your role as you have evolved?
I would say there's so many unique situations, company cultures, training, depending on, whether you're working on federal contracts or small businesses, and different perspectives or acceptable business practices internationally. And I think that has allowed me to see things from so many different perspectives, both personally and professionally, and make subtle observations that people with different experiences may not see, or having that ability to maybe, if it is a non-English speaking employee, that I can imagine. I've lived in a foreign country and have had those languages barriers myself, and anticipate needs or sometimes missing links that may not be realized. And I think a lot of it is when you realize those things, you're able to address them, but you have to know that they exist in the first place. So I think I've been able to bring those unique skills to in my existing positions. And even I found that I'm very often working outside of a tight job description, because I have some skills that maybe not are not a requirement for my job, but I've always felt in my positions to, and in the teams that I've worked on, to use everybody's skills and abilities to make it a better team. And I think that it also, sometimes we don't look at the wider skills of a person, and it also depends on the team you're working with. There are some people who enjoy going beyond their typical duties, and there are other people who want to stick to what their position is. So knowing your team members and contributing in that way. And that has been kind of a mainstay of my career, is being open to new and unexpected opportunities for growth. And it has allowed me to transition into other areas that I never expected to transition to.
Sure. And in some of the jobs that you've had before, where you did like environmental remediation and things of that nature, what would you say were some of the key highlights to the job? And how would you encourage other people to get into those fields?
I would say for the environmental field, as I mentioned, I came into that position with a unique set of skills. And I would have to say I was quite fortunate to work with a diverse team who was very willing to advance everybody, no matter what their background or their gender. Not everybody is so lucky. And that brought me from a very young age that I didn't experience a lot of those challenges to entering, not that there weren't challenges in learning a new profession, but in my mind, that thought that I could not do something as well as somebody else did not enter my mind, because I had teams and worked with teams who did not treat me like that. And we had a system of buddying up or having co-managers, so that it was not a hierarchical aspect where you see in a lot of companies. And so that kind of set me off on the right foot of, sometimes I didn't realize some of those perceptions that other people experience in the field. Granted, I did have challenges along the way, but that helped me deal with them and not feel as intimidated by those challenges. With the environmental field, in the particular role remediation field or projects that I worked on, there was a lot of travel and field work involved. So being open to working in the elements, and really, even though people may think of it as outdoors, you have to be familiar with policies, regulations. I think writing skills cannot be underestimated in any career, because so many careers are about documentation. So encouraging people not to think, hey, I'm never going to have to do these things. It really is an important skill, especially with correspondence these days, and clarity, whether it be technical communication or employee communication, those subtleties of emails and possibilities for misinterpreting or miscommunicating, especially in this virtual world we're transitioning to these days.
So I think one of the key things that you hit on is that there's been a diverse amount of different things that you've done. What recommendations would you give that little girl who's sitting in a small town right now? What would you say to her?
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up, because part of this journey that we're going on this podcast is to share experiences with people. And that's one of the exact things I hope to be able to do through this, is reach people and encourage them wherever they are. I did not mention that I'm actually back in a small town, and I feel it's so important to share. If you have never been exposed to them, you can't always imagine them. And I have been fortunate enough to have those experiences. And I know a lot of people that surround me can't imagine that. And so I am thankful for this opportunity. And one of my goals is to just get people to imagine that, whether it be for a career or museums, information. And I would just encourage them to see what's out there and don't think that things are not possible for you, whether you feel like you have barriers because of your location, because of financial means. I would encourage young people, if they have that goal, there are financial aid, scholarships. If you wish to study abroad, there are resources out there, and probably easier to find these days than when I was in school through the internet. So don't think that it's not possible, because there's a lot of people out there rooting for you. There's resources. I think there's different organizations that realize it is a benefit for our youth today to have those broad experiences. So I that would be my encouragement for those little girls out there. And don't feel you're alone. Any connections that you can have will help you move forward.
And I think also, being a small town girl myself, the idea of picking up and moving to a foreign country is scary, like leaving home and going. But you sound like you've moved around a lot. And in fact, I think you spent quite a bit of time in Mexico, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
What did you do there? What were the jobs that you had as you moved around? And what was like your favorite part of doing all of that?
So, yes, it is a scary thought sometimes, picking up and leaving everything. And in fact, it's an experience for we think moving is bad, but when you move countries, you've got to get rid of everything. Kind of like a clean slate in your personal life and your professional life. You don't have those familiar surroundings. And so something that you have to be mentally prepared for, and you have to be pretty confident in yourself because you will lose access to a lot of those support networks. My personality tends to thrive on those new environments and getting to know new places. And I did have the opportunity through those experiences to have a variety of different positions. And as I mentioned, that clean slate sometimes is a neat opportunity to do something you never imagined yourself doing. I actually taught science classes for a while, which it helps you get to know a culture. At the same time, those dynamics in a classroom are completely different. And in one sense, as I mentioned, I was a shy little girl. The first time when I studied abroad and I had to give a presentation in a foreign language, I was so nervous. And at that point, I said, public speaking in my own language, I looked at it differently because I said, I don't need to be afraid about this. If I can do it in a different language, then I got this. And I also taught English lessons to actually high-level government officials and bank executives. And just an example of how you can take a position that may seem like just an English teacher, but I had some amazing conversations with these professionals and fields that really gave me a depth of knowledge and insight into a culture that many people don't have. That was my first experience as somewhat of an entrepreneur because I did work independently. As my language skills developed, it allowed me the opportunity to work as a translator. Once again, I tried to focus on fields that I was familiar with. So I wasn't just any translator. I was a translator that had environmental skills so that if I did environmental translations, that you knew you were getting something that was really meaningful and not a translation of a word, somebody who understands that context. That also allowed me, when I started my family, to give me some flexibility to be able to work maybe non-traditional hours and in a very large city, not have to do that. We're seeing more and more today having jobs fit your lifestyle or trying to create those jobs that we need. I also was involved with some nonprofit organizations there, again, through the environmental field to get a different approach to typical private companies and the challenges that they face, and companies looking at bigger pictures of the sustainability of this earth and their outreach. So those were some of the unique experiences that I was able to have when I lived abroad.
Well, it sounds like each time, because you've had some different transitions and you faced a lot of what I would consider major resistance to just being able to grow and level up stronger, right? So as you've transitioned to very different sectors and countries, I think that's super exciting. So many people are sitting at home questioning what is their passion and never really getting started and jumping into various different fun opportunities that come their way. Would you say that largely you tackled the opportunities that came your way without hesitation, or how did you fit into finding the things that you were passionate about?
I would say I didn't really meet them with hesitation, but more excitement and anticipation. So, one thing for me, it was a little bit scary for me to think that I would know what I was going to be doing every day for the rest of my life. That security is very important to some people, and they work on amazing teams. But my personality was there's always, once I learn this, I want to learn something else. And I found it very difficult to say no to an interesting opportunity. And I knew I had this idea that if I didn't find that passion, I would still gain some valuable experiences in that process to move on to the next phase. And one of my favorite things is that I feel like cumulatively, even though they may not feel connected, they've all helped me get where I am and make decisions every day. I do see, as the workforce evolves, that you see much more movement. People going from position to position and not staying in that position their entire life. I think also I'm following a topic called reinvention, which is based on the idea that trends used to last in business 50, 60, 70 years before technology or the process has changed enough, but it's changing so quickly these days that you may have 3 or 4 years, and whatever your core business is, you may need to change that approach. And I think that's an important skill moving forward, because many jobs aren't going to stay the same for a very long period of time.
And I think that's a key component too, because the world is changing very rapidly. And you've worked with a lot of different leaders of different companies. What would you say that you see as some of the things that people are doing right as from a leadership standpoint versus the things that we need to do better as leaders to progress at this point?
I would say from the leadership that I have seen, the leaders that work in a team and that inspire, that treat their employees with dignity and knowing that we all have a chance to expand and grow, and recognizing those skills in your employees. As I mentioned, my first position, one of the highest or the highest level female in that particular division of the organization, which was very heavily, there were only a few women in my department at that time, but she took that role. She wanted to bring others up with her. And that starts the change. I have seen environments where sometimes somebody makes it big and they feel challenged by their teammates. So rather than trying to bring people up, they want to preserve their position. And I think that is so dangerous. And whether it be in general, the more I can bring people up, even if I'm training them to fill my position, that allows me to do bigger and better things. So not seeing that as a challenge, but the better we all do, the better we are as a team. I think leaders sometimes underestimate the employees themselves. So very often in that business model, you see focus on the projects, the clients. None of that is possible without the employees. And if you are truly creating an organization, it needs to be more rounded in your employees are really part of your mission. I don't see a lot of companies that include that. You see mission statements focusing on what services you provide and your clients, but not the core. Employees are a core part of that business in a time where it is very difficult to keep people in the workforce. I've seen so much energy going into recruiting employees, but not retaining them. And in an ideal world, I would see, if you put enough resources into retention, then it's less resources that you need to put into recruiting, especially in the technical trades. I was involved in human resources, and the amount of times that you see somebody work for 1 or 2 days, that adds up to a huge impact or time drainer and resource drainer for companies that distracts them from their existing employees. And getting back to the leadership area, making those decisions professional. Like, I very much respect leaders of businesses, but very many times those decisions are based on emotional or connections, which again are very important. But if you have human resources professionals who can kind of see some of those signs, very often I've seen decisions made because of those emotional connections, or, hey, I'm the boss, I can do what I want to, and not acknowledging your support staff, whether that be human resources or your office administrator. They have day-to-day experience in those operations. And if you have good people on your team, they're going to help you make those decisions. And I think valuing their opinion and getting their input on those processes is very important.
How do you see the workforce changing over the next 25 years? And what do we need to do to prepare for that?
I see a much more mobile and flexible workforce. I do struggle with that a bit because some professions are very amenable to that change, whereas some trade fields or high level skilled crafts are a dying trade sometimes, as we discussed. So that mobility in jobs, as we discussed earlier, makes it difficult to fully develop those skills and those crafts. I think we as a society really undervalue those skills necessary, the dedication. We want the best price. How many times and especially when we're looking at our building stock, this isn't just something I buy off the shelf. If this is maintenance to a structure, so many times you go for the lowest bid or the best price, whether that be in our professional life or a home repair. We often regret that and forget to think that all the years it seems like a simple fix to us, but if we hire somebody to do that who has that experience is going to bring that history and their experience on other projects or materials, it really is a good investment. So thinking longer term about those decisions that we make.
And I think we have to start investing in the infrastructure that we have. So you've started to work towards doing some work with property preservation and have a passion for old buildings. Let's talk a little bit about property preservation from a facility standpoint. We have aging federal buildings, we have aging infrastructure, and now we have all of these sustainable practices that we as a society need to start implementing. Have you had any experience with historical preservation, and what would you say is the current issue that we might be facing?
I think it brings up a lot of interesting aspects because many of our historical buildings, the way construction was done and the way these buildings were crafted, they were meant to be repaired. You could repair them, the old windows and different functions of the buildings. And so now we're looking at an age where the newer types of construction, they're replaced and not repaired in a similar fashion. So I think that presents a challenge with the trades because you treat older properties differently. And again, going back to the materials, just I think keeping people aware of being knowledgeable, because you can actually do more damage and end up having to pay more later if you don't use, compatible materials and your mortars, or you can cause further degradation by not doing that properly. So being able to treat those and make sure you ask the questions and do that research before you start to go in and do that work. It also, for me, is not just about the past and the present structures, but how we design our future buildings. Because if we want to have sustainability, we need to build them in such a way that they can be maintained in a sustainable manner, or that the spaces can be used in a flexible way. And keeping in mind, traditionally we think of historic buildings as having aged at least 50 years. So thinking of the buildings we build today, are they still going to be standing in 50 years? What are they going to look like? How can we maintain them? And especially looking at the bigger picture of if we have a shortage of maintenance workforce, we want to be able to do that, not just sustainably, but efficiently. So I think it's really looking at a broader picture. The challenge in the historic preservation field is there are often very strict guidelines. So working within that system to make sure it's functional. The other thing is historic repairs can be very costly. And especially, again, if we don't have people to fulfill those trades, it becomes even more challenging to get those skills geographically in the location where they need to be done. So I do think that presents a challenge, but continuing to look at the bigger picture and the longer term impacts and what your investment is today, looking at it over time to see if there are benefits over the long term by making that investment today.
And I think there's also a symbiotic relationship between environmental remediation now and then the aging facilities infrastructure, right? Because a lot of what we're doing as we're trying to preserve the existing structures is we're going and cleaning up the mistakes of our past using lead and asbestos and things like that in our building and infrastructures. So, and you touched on it, the trades are becoming a vital part of and a key component. We have the baby boomers who know how, as craftsmen, to do a lot of those repairs are now getting ready to retire, right? And so I'm worried that there's going to be a shortage of true craftsmen who are going to be able to do the artistic craftsmanship to continue to be able to maintain these very beautiful and amazing structures that we have created. What would you say is a potential issue or indicator for what we need to do as industries and trades to help bridge that gap between the people that we have now, these artistic crafts, versus the people who are coming next to provide those services? Are we going to end up with a problem in being able to continue to maintain these structures?
I think it goes even well beyond just what the industry can do, because I think we as a society don't put enough value in those trades. One, they're value to us and our need to maintain these buildings, and two, in career paths that people consider, that hierarchy of going to college or what we consider skilled labor. And this kind of stems back to when I lived and worked in Germany. I actually worked for an environmental consulting firm, but had some experience there also in their educational system. I did a study abroad when I was in high school, and their education is very amenable to earlier on in their career. They're already deciding if they want to go to college or if they want to have a trade. And they're very specific career paths, and those trades are very much valued. There's a very high commitment to developing those skills through training and apprenticeships. And thus, it is a very valued profession. I think that we want to have a sustainable workforce. I think it's very important that our societal values also change and we make positions available that people are able to earn a living wage, provide for their family, and have benefits if we are going to keep enough people to these trades going.
I 100% agree with you. I think that we're definitely going to end up with some problems into the future. And as the trades continue to lose people, I think it's going to be very important that we are all having this conversation about what do we do or how do we encourage the next generation to join and use their artistic capabilities to continue to keep things like this and other industries thriving, because there's still going to be a need. We can't tear everything down and start over to improve on and make adjustments to our existing infrastructure.
With the societal view too, I guess I would like to challenge people to also think about the spaces that they like to inhabit and visit. I mean, it's easy for us to go, look at some quaint uptown that still has its historic buildings intact and maintained, like and enjoy, but they don't just happen. It's because people took the effort to maintain them, sometimes at great effort. And I would like to push for is we like to separate historic structures, but any structure that we have will eventually age. And so I like to extrapolate that of let's value our buildings. And if we are going to value something, let's build it and design it as if we want it to be here 50 or 100 years from now. So I think, again, relating to that broader societal aspect, our built environment is what we make it.
Absolutely. No, I 100% agree. And I feel like more and more we are choosing the bottom line instead of the expense of how much it's going to cost to maintain structure that maybe wasn't built to last. That to me is probably a detriment to our long-term success in keeping facilities running. Some brand new facilities are just as challenging to continue to maintain as ones that are over 100 years old, just because they didn't make good choices in some of the components and things that they were putting into those facilities. We're seeing that a lot. If you were to provide or give recommendations on how young people and or someone wanting to start a new career, because you've transitioned several times into new and interesting things. If you were going to give them one piece of advice on how they today can level up stronger, what would it be?
I would say always believe in yourself and never undervalue your experiences, because, and I am an example too. It's so easy to think of what you don't know versus what you do know. And 9 times out of 10, or maybe, it's all about the attitude. you will find that if you start to second guess yourself, that what I don't know starts to overtake you, when normally what you do know will get you through what you don't know, because there's a way to figure that out, especially with the resources of today. Sometimes that's hard to do on your own, so that if you have working together, and as we're trying to do through this podcast, is to inspire them and let them know that they're not alone and they can do it. That allows you to kind of break things down step by step and in pieces, so that it doesn't seem like this big overwhelming thing. When you break it down, you realize I can do this, and this, which makes that impossible feel possible.
I absolutely agree. I think breaking things down into manageable steps and just taking it one day at a time sometimes is what you have to do just to get to the next level. And so I really appreciate you sharing your story with us, and I'm looking forward to us spending time together as we co-host Level Up Stronger. And I think that we've got some amazing people lined up for the next few episodes, people that we've worked very closely with over the last few years, and some exciting stuff. We're starting with facilities management and the facilities and the built environments that we work in, and how can we make this industry even stronger as we go forward in the future. I would just encourage any of the listeners, if you're considering a career in historic preservation in a field looking for ways to level up stronger, have questions about or interested in any additional information about historic preservation, sign up for our newsletter at levelupstronger.com or send us questions at levelupstronger@gmail.com. We really appreciate everybody's time today and look forward to sharing some more time with you as we go forward.
Thank you so much for having me, Tiffany. Look forward to lots of conversations in the future.
Thank you for joining us on Level Up Stronger. For references to resources mentioned in this episode and to receive updates on future podcasts, check us out on social media or at levelupstronger.com. And remember, each time we take risk, educate ourselves, and apply what we've learned to our lives, we level up stronger. Each time we level up stronger, we have the opportunity to reach back and contribute to someone else's success too.